because there's certainly, I mean, there's times when I've been very bad about coming from the top down and saying, you need to get rid of this real quick. You need to stomp this out. You need to stomp this habit out, this sin out, or whatever it is, instead of being, bro, let's go through this together.
Yeah.
You know, and that community and that love is what we're missing, I think.
Yeah. And I think it was really cool you mentioned like vulnerability. And I think two of the most destructive words in this day and age are "I'm good," because we're just accustomed to it. We're just totally used to, conditioned to answering like, "How are you doing?" with "I'm good," and then that being done, the relationship stop it. Like the conversation oftentimes just stops there. You walk the other way. You don't actually take the time to say, "My life sucks."
Yeah.
No, like I'm feeling crushed right now, you know. But no, I'm good. I'm good. And like when we build up those walls, the word that comes to mind is like a facade.
Yeah.
And like that's something I remember in high school, just being so put off by was people who had like a facade of one thing and like on the other side was completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And then thankfully, like in college, I've had so many like friendships and relationships where it's not that. But like for so many people in this society, I feel like those words, "I'm good," that facade of like, hey, you have to put on a face of being, you know, perfect.
Right.
All that. Like I'm broken.
Yeah.
You know, I am messed up. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
My life sucks.
It does.
But you know, we'll go into a conversation and we'll say, "I'm good." No, and like not let people in.
What do you think that comes from? What do you think those two words come from? What do you think the heart is behind those two words when someone says that?
Yeah. I think it's a desire to be seen as something you're not.
Okay.
To be like if you maybe like in a group you're seen as this kind of person.
Right.
But you really like you feel that you're not even you can't possibly live up to all that. Then you're not going to be willing to let people into like the vulnerable, like the truth of, you know, hey, I've messed up here, here, and here.
Yeah.
It's come across my mind of like, I asked before, like what position does a leader have in being vulnerable with the people who's following?
Yeah.
And kind of vulnerability is necessary.
Yeah.
Vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And so I'm not quite sure where I was going with that.
No, it's okay.
But
maybe I'll be able to help you out here because I think I had this conversation with another buddy of mine this past weekend and something along the lines of vulnerability and openness and what that means because he was confused as I was talking about it. And a big misconception that I had about vulnerability is that you had to be done with a certain struggle to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And you hear a lot of testimonies. Timothy Atit comes to mind, and this is not to knock on him at all. It's actually to put him up, hopefully. He is very open about his former struggles with pornography. And he says, I have a story to tell. And as much as I love that, and I love that openness, and I think those conversations are needed and necessary, there was this sense where like, man, I can't talk about this until I'm where he is.
Yeah.
Right? Until I have that story to tell and say, man, I'm completely done with it. But you got to realize that story, wherever it is, starts where you are.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a story that's continuing to be written by the Lord, and it will ultimately glorify the Lord if you allow it to. But there's a flawed line of thinking where we say, man, until I'm good, I won't say that something was going on in the past, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think, you know, testimonies are so interesting to me. While you have such vulnerability and you can get to know somebody so well, it's always in the past tense, bro. Right?
Yeah.
It's always in the past tense. It's, man, I went through this relationship. I was going through pornography. I was going through masturbation. I was going through this pride or this lust or whatever it is. But it's like, I was. It's like, what's going on right now, bro? You know, and sometimes, man, that's the medium, that's the audience, and just where you're comfortable, man. But I mean, I think radical vulnerability, and it truly would just be radical vulnerability, is the ability to say, man, right now, I'm freaking hurting.
Yeah.
You know, right now I am terrified and I'm afraid. And right now, I mean, I'm living in sin, you know, which if any of us were honest at any given moment, all three of those statements would be accurate in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
but we're so genuinely afraid to make those claims because I think, and this is what I was maybe trying to draw out of you, and hopefully you can kind of agree with this, is we're afraid of our image, and we're also afraid of putting down the image of Christ because we recognize that we bear it.
Oh, true.
We recognize that we bear the image of Christ, and we feel as though if we've made a mistake, then Christ hasn't done enough, you know? And as if Christ has not, you know, convinced us enough of who he is, which, I mean, it's not on him to convince us. He's done it all. It's whether or not our hearts are soft enough and just open enough to receive what he's already done. And so I think it's strange how we try to save Christ's face when Christ's face doesn't need to be saved. So we're ultimately saving our own, you know, and that, I mean, I won't call it selfish in the sense that, I mean, man, you're selfish, but I mean, you look at it objectively and you say, yes, you're looking at your own image and you're saying, man, I am terrified of what this truth could say about me in the eyes of other people.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to get at. And I think like a way to combat that is knowing that sanctification is a process. And like, because I remember coming across a passage in Scripture, and it was talking about you know, us being made perfect, but it almost sounded like as if our salvation was contingent on that, but it's not, because our salvation is contingent on the death of Jesus Christ. And so I was basically with sanctification, like if we're willing to admit like, hey, I'm currently struggling with this, I'm currently like going through this battle, I'm dealing with this sin, then that's not like a detriment to our witness, because we can say, yes, I am dealing with this, but I'm fighting it because Christ is giving me sanctification. Christ is like sanctifying me through discipleship. You know, if I'm surrounded by a community who can hold me accountable, then yes, I might be like going through bouts of anger, but like I am growing. I'm growing out of that. It's a process. Sanctification is, you know, we're not going to reach it while we're on this earth. We're not going to be perfect. But we can point others to Christ and saying that like, yes, even though I am broken, even though I'm currently like stuck in sin, I am free. And so that freedom is Christ. That freedom is sanctification. So,
well, I think it's like, and I'll geek out on some Greek here, but it's always the case in Scripture. You know, you go back to the original languages where we are the passive recipients of God's grace. Right? But we are the active ministers of his will. Right? And so like anything that God's done for us, he has done for us. He was the actor and we have received his grace, right? We do not go get grace. We do not go out and, you know, seek and just, you know, grab a hold of it as if it's, you know, just ours to take, right? God gives it to you. It's a gift from God. He is the actor when it comes to grace. And we're just the recipients. However, when it comes to his will, he uses us as his actors. And I think that's where, I mean, again, we underestimate so heavily the value of community and accountability. And I love how you use those two words just immediately beside each other, because those two prongs are just the most dangerous weapons against Satan and the devil. Right? Because, I mean, you can have community without accountability, right? You can have a really fantastic church that loves the Lord and, you know, has a great message, has a great, you know, team of leaders that wants to know you, right? And wants to build a relationship with you and love you. But part of that love comes in the form and the shape of, man, how are you doing with this? How are you doing with lust this week? Right? How are you doing with your pride this week? How are you doing with this relationship? Have you reconciled? Have you attempted to reconcile this relationship? How are you doing with your stress and your anxiety? Right? Are you putting your trust in the Lord, or are you continuing to trust in yourself? Right? These questions that are like strangely specific and strangely pointed that do take a relationship, right? Because asking somebody whom you don't have a relationship with, who you don't have a bond with, those questions doesn't come off well at all. Right? So it starts there, but it never ends there. You get from community to a place of accountability, and it's just continually, again, sanctification is a process, like you said. And I tend to think about a lot of things in the terms of sports, you know? But you look at, I mean, your deadlift or your bench press or your squat, nothing goes up in a day, right? Your bench doesn't go up in a day. Your squat doesn't go up in a day, right? I mean, you kind of have to reverse the logic there and say, man, your pride doesn't disappear in a day. Your lust doesn't disappear in a day, right? Your struggle with this sin doesn't disappear in a day. It takes discipline, spiritual discipline. And discipline is just actions repeated over time. You're making a series of choices, and that series is most often, I'm going to choose, again, your will over my will, Father. Your will be done over mine.